This episode might sting a little because we're talking about something every creative faces, but few of us want to admit out loud. Failure. That word alone makes some of us want to shut down. We start replaying every project that didn't take off, every song that didn't stream, and every post that didn't connect. And if you're a Christian creator, that fear can cut even deeper. You can find yourself wondering if your failure somehow means that you missed out on God's will. Or worse, maybe He's even disappointed in you. I've been there. I've stared at my own unfinished work, my own episodes, and thought, did I mess this up? Is this just a pipe dream? Was this never meant to be? The question is, how do you move forward when failure feels final? How do you trust God when what you created doesn't seem to be working? And what if the thing that you are calling failure is actually part of the process He is using to make you better? That's what we're unpacking today in today's episode of the God and Gig Show. How to overcome the fear of failure without losing your creative fire. If you're new here, welcome. Thanks for joining us. My name is Alan C. Paul. I'm a musician, podcaster, author, and coach, and we're here at God and Gigs to help you to overcome temporary creative problems with timeless spiritual principles. Make sure you follow and subscribe so that you never miss an episode that will help you become the creator that God created you to be. All right, let's jump in and talk about how to face failure and overcome it with your faith. Fear is real. Let's just all agree on that, right? Can we all agree that fear is real? I know that people talk about fear in terms of whether it's Halloween and ghosts and goblins and all the other silly stuff that I know some people enjoy talking about. And then some of us, especially in the Christian world, are like, we don't deal with that, all that stuff for Halloween. But pretty much all the way through October, people talk about fear and, horror and all these other things because it just becomes the topic of the day. But creators, we deal with fear 24/7, 365. And here's what I mean by that. I already can hear you quoting the verse, God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind. And I'm going to make reference to that. But God has not given us a spirit of fear. That's not the issue. We're not saying whether God has given us a spirit of fear because He hasn't. The question is the spirit of fear real in Christian creators' lives? And the answer has to be yes, because otherwise, why do we have to deal with so many struggles when it comes to overcoming our fears of failure, our fears of rejection, our fears of worrying about what people will think of us, whether we will be criticized, whether we'll make our goals, or even the fear of success when we reach our goals and we realize we've got to level up and we're not ready for a certain task. So all of this is kind of like the overarching kind of viewpoint that I would love to approach this from. And here's my question for you, even those of you who are watching live or watching on replay or listening later. What are you really afraid of? What are you really afraid of? Because here's what I think is really happening for many of us when we talk about facing the fear of failure as Christian creatives. It's very easy simply to say, I'm afraid of failing. But I went and did a quick search on the fear of failure on all of these other platforms and different psychologists and every life coach you want to find, right? And I didn't want to sound like them. But the truth is, many of them have nailed the one issue, which is fear of failure is not really fear of failure. There are underlying fears that are the ones that are actually fueling the fear of failure. Because when you are afraid of failing, you're really, if you think about it, afraid of what comes with the failure. The failure itself of the actual goal only has certain consequences. But the things attached to the failure of whatever it is you are afraid to approach, to try, to set a goal for, the things attached to that failure is kind of like you imagine, like if you're dragging something and then, as you're dragging it, you actually got the strings there, but the things that actually attach to the strings, you're just holding on to the strings. But the reason why the weight is heavy is not because of the string or the chain. It's the things that are being dragged. So the fear of failure is kind of like what attaches to all of the other fears that you're dragging along. And it's why you're scared to move forward, because all of that weight is actually connected to these other things that you are afraid of. So let's talk about what you're actually afraid of as a Christian creator. Or let's be honest, since I don't know what you're afraid of, what I might be afraid of. I'll put myself on a chopping block. So one of the things I've always have been afraid of has been the fear of being seen or being perceived as not capable, being perceived as not good enough, being perceived as he's the problem. That has been a big issue my entire life. And I didn't mean to put myself on a therapy couch, but I'll just tell you a quick story of one of those days that I was crushed because of being rejected or being seen as not capable. And it was high school, of course, because high school seems to be all the stories of being rejected and being seen as less than and dealing with your own self-esteem issues. And it was a day where I was tasked with being in charge of a homecoming parade or homecoming something organizing around homecoming. And I think I was either freshman class president or something. I mean, basically the lowest of the low, but the highest of the lowest, I guess, right? I was the king of the pawns. Well, let's just say it went as badly as it could possibly go. If you know me, you already know I am not an organizer. I love to support others, but I am not the best leader when it comes to organizing pieces of a project. That's why I'm so glad I have an assistant who helps me keep all this stuff together. And my wife is in a managerial mode all the time. I'm not the manager, and I was asked to be the manager. And yes, everything fell apart. And I still remember the feeling when basically I was dismissed. Like people just said, leave. You're messing this up. Please go home. And the feeling of rejection and the feeling of failure and the feeling of being basically labeled as you're not good enough, you are the problem, is a fear that I have had to overcome for years. And yes, even in my 50s, after so many years. Why am I able to pull up that memory? It's because it actually connected with something that was deeply fearful of. I was deeply fearful of, and it happened. And so now I have to come to grips with the fact that, okay, if my fear of failure is connected to my fear of being seen as less than, the fear I need to overcome is not necessarily the fear of failure. I need to overcome the fear of people seeing me as less than and not capable. This is making sense, because as a Christian creator, you have to reach out. You have to push forward. You have to do things that will put you in a position where you may be judged or seen as not quite capable. So before you worry about your fear of failure, let's consider your real fear, which again, I'm raising my hand. This might be your fear too. The fear of being seen as less than. The fear of rejection in terms of your ability or your real, your innermost feeling of worthiness. Okay? So here's what I would love for us to do, even in the comments if you're watching this on replay. Let's be honest and share. Don't worry, nobody's going to judge you. Let's talk about the individual fear that you have that is underlying your fear of being a Christian creator who failed at something. A great story I've been telling for the last couple of weeks has been from our students, one of our students who was in our accelerator, and she shared one of her goals. But then we found out that that goal she set was really not the goal she wanted to achieve. She was afraid to mention the goal because, once again, there was a fear of failure in that goal. So she didn't even mention the goal. But the true goal, or the true fear, I should say, was the fear of not knowing what to do next, the fear of uncertainty, the fear of what if I get into this and I have no idea what to do and how to do it, and I'm just going to feel like a failure. So the feeling like a failure came from a lack of skills or a lack of knowledge that she felt, and felt like this was going to mask or unmask her inability to achieve this goal at all. This is where, once again, a chain of fear of failure was connected to another chain, which was a fear of uncertainty or feeling like you were incapable of a task. This is where, once again, I hope you are thinking now, let's overcome that fear. Let's overcome the fears that keep you thinking like failure is going to be the final destination. If you can get over that fear, if you can pray and actually look at what God has put on the inside of you and say, okay, God didn't put the spirit of fear of uncertainty. God didn't put the spirit of fear of worthiness. God didn't put the spirit of fear of rejection. All of these specific fears and the spirit of each one of these fears was not from God, is not from God, and each one of them has a replacement. So when he says not of fear, but of love, you are loved. We talk about that in the Creator's Battle, how love is actually the thing that conquers all. Love is what makes you more than an overcomer. Love is what makes you able to overcome the enemy by the blood of the Lamb and the word of your testimony. The blood of the Lamb is Jesus' love. It's his love for you that allows you to overcome your fears. Not only that, sound mind. So if your fear is of, I don't know what to do next, I'll be confused, I'll be frustrated, I'll be out on my own. Well, maybe it's time for you to acknowledge that your fear of not having the skills is overcome by God giving you a sound mind. You can learn. You can get the tools. You can join a community like God in Gigs 360. And you can become the creator that God created you to be with the tools and the skills that he will allow you to learn. So as you can see, each one of these fears that's underlying your fear of failure has an antidote. And why not we go to the last one of love, power, and a sound mind? I said sound mind, so power. So let's address that one. What does power overcome? Well, the power, I believe, is the power of the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit is a comforter. So maybe your fear is of being alone, but the power of the Holy Spirit accompanies you in everything you do and every situation you step into. So maybe your fear is of being rejected, of not knowing anyone, of feeling you're alone, that no one's going to come to your rescue. And that fear can be overcome by you saying, greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world. And the Holy Spirit is always with you. So the power of that particular thought can overcome the fear. I hope this is making sense. I hope that whether it's October that you're hearing this or whatever season, that you are realizing that each fear that you are facing as a Christian creator can be overcome with a specific thought, with a specific action, and most importantly, with a specific mindset where your prayer and your art and your lifestyle all come together into a confident whole that says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, and you will not be afraid of anything that would stop your progress. So, my friend, I hope that blessed you. I was honestly encouraged just by sharing that. Even in my own life, I've been dealing with certain fears and certain places where I feel inadequate. I don't have enough skill. I will look foolish. And all of these fears are connected to the fear of failure. But the failure, honestly, is not the biggest issue. I could fail to make whatever the money goal is. I could fail to achieve a certain desired result in my music or in my podcasting. But all of those things are just like the actual action that would create a failure. The feeling of failure is much deeper than that. And that is what I believe God has given us an antidote for. So that if you don't achieve the goal, you're actually better off either way. Like, you can't lose. You either win or you learn, but you can't lose. So I hope that blessed you today. I loved it. And I will pray for you consistently, my friend, that you will overcome fear with faith.